Now it's recording. Okay. Sharing screen. All right. As I said, y'all did pretty well doing assignment 2.1. It's one that you were able to figure out how to do the input. And it came out and it looked pretty good. And I graded about half of them. But the first program you had in section 213 was this one called Payroll. So right now, all I did was upload for you to see on your screen the Payroll program, the one code listing. Some things that are now new, and again, all of you figured it out for your programs. And I'm not good with chat. Sorry, something was wrong with my connection, but it's fine now. Okay, good. All right, so we have this program. Again, it's called Payroll. Line number 7 says public class payroll. So when we save it, we have to save it as the same there. Shortly, I'm going to start asking you to put your initials in. So at that point, I'd like you to say public class, for example, my initials DPF payroll. And then when I save it, I would do a save as DPF payroll. Those names have to actually match up to be the same. But starting here in 213, we're finally going to allow the user to input information. And in order to do so, we're going to look at one of two ways to do it. Now, currently, we do a lot of our work with the output down in that little console window. So if I wrote this program for someone else, they'd have to have Java open so that they could be looking at the console window for input and output. But as a user of a program, we're going to want something different. Excuse me, and that's where these GUIs are going to come into play, which is the second half of section 213. But here in the first half, just running through kind of quickly what we're talking about. In order to use the console, that's that block down at the bottom of your Java IDE. In order to use the console for input, we have to start with this line number 1 called import java.util.scanner. Now, why do we have to put that in there? Well, Java is huge. It's gigantic. And if we would go to compile everything that's involved with Java, it would take forever. So within Java, things are broken down into classes. And this way we can compile a program quicker by only including the code already written in Java that we need. So in order to do input with the console down there at the bottom, we need that import java.util.scanner line of code in it. All right? So that's the first new line. So taking a look at payroll, we ask for a name, hours, these are my variables. Name, which is a string, hours, which is int, double pay rate, and gross pay. Line 17 now says, okay, so we have that scanner class involved. I'm going to make up a variable name. The name I'm making up is called keyboard. So whenever I want, I could put whatever I want in there for keyboard. So if you had this program loaded up on your machine, you could put scanner mom equals new scanner system.in. But then whenever you get to lines like 21 where we say name equals keyboard, you would have to put mom. So that keyboard is actually a variable name. So it can come and go, you can make it up whatever you want. Okay, so I needed the import statement, and I needed line 17 that says scanner keyboard equals new scanner system in. This is now going to set me up and it will allow me, allow me to do input down in that console window. Okay, line 20, system.out.print, what is your name? And we have name equals keyboard.next line. Now, we're going to go to the keyboard, and it is going to wait for input that when I put .next line says, hey, the input is going to be a string. I'm going to type in something that looks like a string. So when we say, what is your name? We type in the whole name. Then the next part, we say, please enter the number of hours. And here's a new distinction. This time, instead of reading in a string and storing it in a string, I want to read in an integer and store it in an integer. So this time it's keyboard not or next int. And then down in 29 in the code listings, you type keyboard dot next double. Okay. Doing so, I now have a program that's going to ask me to type some things in. Now, again, this working in the console is for the developer. It's for the programmer to use. When we start writing programs, we're going to use what's in the second half of this section, and that's we're going to start using GUIs. Okay. Code listings. They should have been due at 10 o'clock today, but instead I actually had a deadline of Monday at 10 o'clock, thinking we had class on Monday, but we did not. So for those of you who didn't complete the 4 code listings for today, I extended the deadline for those to be 5 o'clock tonight. So there's about a third of the class that still needs to upload those. So I'm talking about code listing 2, and it was it was from section 213. So you have a chance to get those done this afternoon. Okay, any questions on this payroll program? All right, the next one, discard edits. All right, the next one that you had was something called input problem. Okay, now sometimes we're going to get an input problem, and here's what's happening. Once again, we are working down in the console window. So in line 1, we say import java.util.scanner. In line 17, again, we're reusing the word keyboard, which is fine. It makes sense. Scanner keyboard equals new scanner system in. Then I get to line 21 and I say, hey, I'd like to know what your age is right now. All right. So if I asked Cameron, you're on my screen, what would you type in when this is prompted for your age? And you can make it up.
25.
Okay, so you would hit 2, 5, and then what?
Just enter.
Enter. Good. And when it's working with that, it's all good. So the second line, it says, please enter your annual income. So again, this time I'm doing keyboard.next double. Cameron, what's your income? You can make it up.
20,000.
Okay, so you type in 20000 and then
Enter.
enter. Okay, so for both of those, after you typed in your age, you hit enter, and the next thing it wanted was a double, so it skipped over that enter. Okay, the next thing you did is you entered your salary and put in an enter. So when you got ready to do your salary, it was looking for a number and it ignored the enter. When you typed in your salary, you typed in the 20,000 and that enter is still sitting in the buffer. So the next line, when it says, what is your name? It sees the enter and says, wait a minute, that's legit for me. That's like a string. So it only reads the enter in. So that's something we're going to have to be careful of. Again, when you did age, you went 2, 8, enter. And then what was asking for your income, it said, oh, there's an enter sitting in the buffer. I'm going to ignore that enter. I'm going to go and wait for a number. So you typed in 20,000 and an enter. The enter's sitting in the buffer. When it asks for your name, it's saying, uh-oh, enter can be a possible name. Sounds kind of weird, but that's part of a string input and it takes it. So it never read in the name. So what you would have to do is, and if you were looking in the book, there's a code listing 231 that shows how to fix it. And you could just do a simple keyboard.next line. So if I took this program and I just, after that income, I go keyboard, not all spelling is important, keyboard.next line, it would eat up that enter. So now I could say, what is your name? And it's now going to wait for a string which ends with an enter to be inputted. So again, this is only working in the console window, and it's nice and simple, and it would be a way to clean it up. Questions? Questions on this input problem? Okay, good. I'm going to close that one. So those were the first two code listings you had for today. They were section 213. And again, it works, it's for the programmer. It's displaying and working with input down in that console window. All right, so the second part of today, this time it's section 214, and it's called Dialog Boxes. And this is what's going to make things a whole lot easier for the user versus the programmer. All right, so the first thing I have is, let's see, it was code listing called Names Dialog. Names Dialog. Again, I'm loading it up on the screen if you want to load it up on your screen, but we'll go through this. And all right, so one of the things I'm now going to have to get used to is checking the beginning of my program, making sure I'm using the appropriate import statement. So the one a moment ago was we had import, and it was java.util.scanner. Now all of a sudden I have one when I'm working with GUIs instead of working with input from the keyboard, that's javax.swing.joptionPane. Okay, this is going to allow me to work with GUIs. And if you did the code listings, a lot of you are like, yeah, I got it. It almost makes sense. Okay, so now that I'm going to work with these dialog boxes, the first one I'm going to work with is where I ask the user to input the first name. Now, this is great because when I do this, a little GUI is going to pop up. It's going to say, what is your first name? And it's going to read it in as a string. Whenever I do JOptionPane .show input dialog, it's going to read something as a string. So I have to do something with it. What do? I store it in a string. So first name equals JOptionPane. First name is declared as a string. Whoop, whoop. I'm rocking and rolling, and I'm ready to go. All looks good. Second one in here. And again, the author likes to put stuff on multiple lines. It's not always necessary to do that. In the old days, we would run out of line space because in the old days, we didn't have all these pictures and all drop-down menus and all that. We had a screen, and the screen was 26 lines by 80 columns. So there was times you couldn't go past the 80 columns. We didn't have a scroll bar to go left or right. And the 80 columns actually comes from, does anybody know where it comes from? The ever popular punch card. So way back when I started college at Shippensburg, my first programming class, I had to use punch cards. What I mean by that is I put this card in the machine. It's like the shape of an envelope. And I would type it, and it would punch little holes in that card for each letter. Each card was one line of code. So if you look at this program that you have in front of you, and you started counting the number of lines that are typed, you would need 20-some cards for this program. So what you ripped through in seconds, back in the day, each line of code was a punch card. It had to be in the right order. I then would take that stack of cards, put it in a collator, and hope that they didn't jam or rip up, because then I'd have to retype each individual line. Then I'd watch it up on a TV screen, because it could only compile, the mainframe computer in 1980 could only compile 3 programs at a time. So I would be stuck in this queue until it would compile mine. If it compiled, then I went over to this other machine and I watched, because it could only print 3 programs at a time. So then I'd wait by the printer. Finally, it would print out. It would either say it worked or it didn't work. If it didn't work, it showed me my error messages. And then I'd have to go back and get new cards, type in new cards, rearrange the order, da, 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 da. So will you folks do this 20-line program in front of you that some of you are doing in 4 minutes would take an hour, you know, or, you know, assuming I would be more efficient or not. But anyhow, those punch cards were 80 columns. So the first screens were all 80 characters wide. You know, so if you went into something, the C colon, and you started working with the command prompt, and all of a sudden you see there's a standard font. So anyhow, story time's over. Okay, so I input 2 strings, and I get to display first name and last name. Now, I want to talk about line 21, which is jOptionPane.show message dialog null, and then a whole bunch of output. Now that output could get bigger and bigger and bigger. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back up to my declaration section, and I'm going to create a new variable, and I'm going to call it string data type. I'm going to call it out str, okay? And that's short for out string. So what I can do in my program before my jOptionPane is I could go out str, my out string equals. Now I'm going to put my string literal hello plus first name, name plus we have the space, so string literal, that's just a space, plus last name. Now, inside of my jOptionPane show message dialog box, I'm going to get rid of all of that, and I'm going to put outstra. Okay? Easy, right? Some of you are saying, you're wasting my time. Why did you do something like that? Hopefully, if I compiled it and run it, it's all nice. But now what I'm going to do is go back up to my outstra, where I have hello, first name, space, last name, and I'm going to put a plus /n. What's the /n do?
New line.
Yeah, thank you. It's going to put a carriage return. Now I'm going to put outstra again, and I'm going to put equals outstra, which is the line I just created with the carriage return on the end, and plus, and then I'm going to I'm going to put double quotes, multi-line, this is crazy. So now when I get ready and run this program, and hopefully it will run, and I type in my first name, and I can't because I got a typo. Where's my typo? Why do I have a parenthesis there? I don't know. I thought it was wrong, but you typed it. Yeah, that doesn't mean it's right if I typed it. So now let's see if the program works. And again, my computer, like I said, is painfully slow today. It's going to ask me, what is my first name at some point? Yep, it's coming. It's coming. I'm going to blame Java because Java asked me for an update. There we go. What is your first name? Bill. Okay. What is your last name? Bob. Okay. And it says, hello, Bill Bob. Now, because I put that /n in, I get this multi-line is crazy. So now I can start putting more than just one line in this message dialog box. Okay. And I could keep adding to that outstra so that I could get multiple lines in here instead of one line that runs all the way across the screen. Kind of cool? Yes, good. It's good I recorded today. All right. The next one is called Payroll Dialog. So this takes that payroll program that we did, and it in fact is going to, when I look at line 1, import Java Swing.jOptionPane. Good. So now I'm going to come down. Program starts out similar. Line 20, it says name equals J option pane. Okay, whenever I do input dialogue, I have to store it somewhere. Because if I got rid of the name equals in front and just had J option pane showing, it would still work. But name would never get stored somewhere. So I need to keep that in there where I'm assigning it to something in the beginning. All right. And again, the author does this craziness that you don't have to do. And it just says, what is your name? Okay. So now it's going to bring it in and it's going to store it in name. In line 23, you see, this time I'm going to go J option pane, show input dialog. How many hours did you work? Well, I'd like to type in 60 because I work 60 hours. But one thing you have to remember is when I use an input dialog box, it brings it in as a string. So as you can see in line 23, input string equals. So I just have what I'm calling a temporary string called input that's going to store that 60. Now, what has to go along with it? Well, if you see on this next line, I am actually doing the conversion. Hours equals integer.parseInt that input string, which says take that input string, turn it into an integer. Just like the next one, I'm saying input string. I'm reusing it because I don't need it anymore. Input string equals, and again, the author loves his multi-lines, and we really don't need them, so I don't want you to think you have to do it. Put it all in one line, okay? What is your hourly pay rate? As soon as it brings it in, stores it in input string, I have to go ahead and convert it to a double. Pay rate equals double dot parse double of whatever that input string was to turn it into a double. So it's coming in as a string. If I don't need it as a string, then I have to do this conversion and turn it over to a double. And again, the author has all of this output in his show message dialog box. And again, you saw a moment ago where I actually liked doing the creating a temporary string and then putting that in there. Questions? Good. Okay. That's the lesson. So I'm going to stop the recording there and I'll tell you what we are going to do next.